The 1964 Indianapolis 500 was the first live telecast. She went to a theater, and we watched it live on closed-circuit television in San Gabriel, California, I believe. It was the hometown of one of the drivers. 2 minutes into the race, that driver was killed, and they stopped the race for the first time in history. So I learned about real life 2 minutes into my exposure of racing. It was quite profound and dramatic, and the fact everybody went back in the theater and watched the race and still is something that I'm dealing with. It was a very powerful moment. If it was worth risking everything for, it had to be worth something. I'm Paul Pfanner, and I'm the founder and CEO of RACER Media and Marketing. Starting RACER was a dream from a very early age. Something like RACER was something I wanted to do as early as elementary school. My allowance went toward buying magazines and reading books. I'd go to the library, read every book, and it was all immediate. Like, this is a matter of days. I immersed myself into this. I clicked with it. My grandmother and grandfather on my father's side were artists, and I would be left for them to watch me when I was a kid, and my grandmother would draw on paint, and I would draw on paint with her, and I would be encouraged. My father was the one who thought I had this in me, and he just said, this is something you ought to really think about doing. You seem to really be passionate about it. Anything that was an expression of my passion for something I wanted to do. Art was my way in. I was an art director, and part of the team that started, I didn't personally start, it was called Formula Ford Review, became Formula Magazine. I would illustrate Formula's articles sometimes. Got better doing that to the point it was professional level. I did sponsorship illustrations, concept illustrations for racing cars. I did all of this work, and I just made me better. Did logo design, that sort of thing. But when I was in my years at Sports Car Magazine as the editor and art director, I did the work behind me to celebrate Mario Andretti's World Championship and remember Phil Hill's World Championship, the only two Americans to have won the World Championship. That meant a lot to me because Mario and Phil were my heroes. It was the cover of Sports Car. By the way, he's the last American to win a Formula One race. I think it was the Belgium Grand Prix in 1978. It's the last time Americans won the race. I think that's something I'd like to see change in my lifetime. You know, the people we know in life that you click with sometimes, the people that you realize have a passion like you do, and you just hang on to them. One of those is probably one of the most central figures in my life is my friend Jeff Zwart. He was at Art Center studying photography, and Jeff's just a brilliant guy, and I was recommended to use him almost against my will. I had another photographer, and we did a photo shoot early in the sports car journey where I was invited to drive a Can-Am car, which at the time was the highest horsepower, fastest race car I would be in, and it was also something I dreamt of doing, and we wanted to rig mount the cameras. Jeff had not done a professional photo shoot yet, so I literally was his first professional shoot, and on the way up, he had this Porsche. We drove up to the race shop in Central California, and on the way up, we just had this get-to-know each other conversation about what we dreamt of, what we were doing. He was unimpressed with Formula, the magazine I'd worked on before. He didn't really, Jeff, he wasn't going to BS me, and said, yeah, I'd like to do a proper magazine like that. And he finished it and started talking about the magazines in Europe and Japan, and we made a commitment during that brief trip that we would do this someday together. And if you know Jeff, and if you get to know me, when you commit to things, we do them, you know, and it took a long time, but we did finally get that done 12 years later, I think. It took a while. My memory ultimately is just getting over the hump and getting RACER launched. Standing there with Jeff and having my friend Chris Economaki, who was a mentor and very kind to me, raise a toast at the RACER party, saying, you know, here's to the success of RACER. There's room enough for both of us. He published a competitive racing magazine that I read when I was a kid, and realizing that we were real and we were in this world, and this person I admired so much was almost saying, hey kid, you're in. This is real. And that, everything else has been, you know, a gift after that. 30 years is a long time, but I hope long after I'm gone, this brand and this magazine is still here doing what it's doing now. And not in the physical sense, but in the spiritual sense. This captures a moment that was a spectacular moment in racing during kind of the Mansel era. And Mansel had gone to drive for Ferrari, which seemed like an a natural fit. It didn't seem like that would work, but he won right out of the gate in a John Barnard designed Ferrari that's, to me, perhaps one of the most beautiful Formula One cars ever created. It was a step forward in thinking and elegance, but the way those cars were driven and the sound they made, to me, was the zenith of Formula One. Nothing has been quite like that. They were really quick, really raw. They had skid plates that would generate these showers of sparks that would be swirled by the vortices coming out from underneath the car. They were just visually brilliant to look at. And then the sound that they made, the V10 engines made, would pierce your soul. They just stick. I could still hear it when I'm talking about it. And that, to me, is captured in this really beautiful Paul Laguette illustration. During that era, I ran into Paul at the Phoenix Grand Prix. And of course, Paul was doing what I did. He'd made his own credentials and was wearing a fake Ligier or McLaren, I forget which, outfit. And that's when I knew we were kindred spirits. So it has a little backstory to it. I love it. Paul Laguette and Laurence Foster are this creative, dynamic duo. And Laurence is the editor-in-chief of all of our work here. He oversees everything. He's a top creative in the company, over the agency, over the magazines. But Laurence is also a degreed aerodynamicist who turned down an assistant aero job at Williams to be a magazine editor. And this car is the ultimate solution for downforce. And it took the Jim Hall concept one step further. It has a fan that draws the air out from underneath the car, the BT-46 Brabham, that won the Swedish Grand Prix in 1978. And I was active as the editor of Sports Car at that time, in the space as a driver at that time. And that car just blew me away because of just the creativity. And they claimed that the fan was the exit fan for the cooling system because it was drawing air through the radiators on the top of the engine cover, when in fact the car was skirted, so the whole car was sealed to the ground, and it worked beautifully. I love the fact that Gordon Murray, I don't believe, was a formally trained engineer. He was an artist and he could draw. He had a lot of the basic skill sets and the imagination that I think is in me. So he's the ultimate manifestation of what can happen if you are a creative and you see the world differently and you don't follow the path everyone else does. And every car he's ever designed is beautiful. I think every car he's designed works. And he's just a brilliant talent. And to me, that's a monument to how brilliant he is. And that's a monument to the original spirit of the sport. That's what racing should be to me, is creative ingenuity. I love Le Mans and I love sports car racing. IMSA's, comfort food for my soul. I feel at home in an IMSA paddock, and I love the people that run IMSA, the cars that race in IMSA. They tell a story. Every car is a story. That's the reason it exists. It's connected to the brand and the heart of the brand. But to me, one of the most heroic stories in the history of sports car racing is the giant killer story in 1991 of Mazda winning Le Mans after so many attempts. As a young person, Mazda was a brand I was attracted to. I went to the dealerships. I liked how different the cars were. I loved the sound of the rotary racing engine. I loved the spirit of Mazda. And I identified with, so when that car won, I felt like I won. It meant something to me. And Toyota has literally been the blood in the system keeping Le Mans alive and giving it validity. And Toyota's also got a noble and heroic spirit when it goes racing. It tells stories. And it's willing to suffer failure on the way to learning how to win and learning how to improve technology. In the same way, the humility of Toyota reflected that too. They're there to learn. My crew chief when I raced is a guy named Mike Hall, and Mike is a brilliant team manager now for Chip Ganassi Racing. When I was making mistakes and I tried to make excuses, he stopped me and said, racing is learning. And these two cars are examples of racing being learning. Those winning legacies that they have came from learning and subjecting themselves to failure to learn. And that's the story of my life in racing. The NFT space is what artists and creatives have been waiting for, to have, if you will, provenance of their creative origin and participate in the monetization of their art and also the authentication of their art. It is really built for creators to get the deserved benefit of their talent and their creative minds. So that had me at hello, and we're entering the space with one of my close collaborators, Paul Laguette, who's been the foundation of so much of our success here. I want Paul and anyone like Paul to see benefit from what comes from the NFTization of our art and creative work. At the same time, as a brand, we're about getting to the future faster. That's really all racing is. The core of our reason for being is, get to the future faster. I believe in this project because of the quality of the people involved and the fact that they're there to learn. Racing is learning. This is another example of how to learn together and be in the conversations that inform us all about what the appropriate use, meaning, potential of NFTs are. And you're not going to learn it unless you're doing it. So that's really why we're there. We've got to go make the normal ratio of errors to successful decisions, but you're not going to ever do it properly unless you start doing it. And it's new. So let's start doing it now, and let's start with great art, and let's also start with people we know and trust who are there for the right reasons. With the team Taro has put together, I already know that's the case from interacting with everybody, and I have great faith in Taro. I've seen how he's built his previous business and the way he ethically behaved and the great work he did there. So quality attracts opportunity, and I want to stand with quality and be part of that opportunity.